Hello there. If there's one writer-director who epitomises the famous flop, it's John Carpenter. And while I'm sure I'll be covering a lot of his work in the future, I want to start with his first big flop come good, 1982's The Thing, based on the 1938 novella Who Goes There. It had already been made into a film in 1951 as The Thing from Another World, but that version threw aside most of the original story and was more of a standard 50s monster movie. Carpenter was first approached to direct in 1976 by co-producer Stuart Cohen. But as we saw with The Wizard of Oz, the path to becoming a famous flop is never so smooth. And with Carpenter yet to establish himself as an influential director, Universal Studios passed and chose Tobe Hooper, who was already under contract with them. Unhappy with Hooper's concept, however, he was fired, and the failed search for a script and a director put the film on hold. The success of Carpenter's Halloween in 1978 and Alien in 1979 meant renewed interest in the project, as both Carpenter and sci-fi horror had proved themselves enough for Universal to put some money on the table. Unfortunately, Carpenter wasn't too keen. Being a fan of the original film, in spite of its weak monster, felt he couldn't do a better job, but was convinced to read the original story and was hooked by the concept. He saw a parallel between the story and Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, where 10 strangers are gathered under mysterious circumstances on a remote island, only to be killed off one by one. With that, and the idea he could update the story to reflect the time it was being made in, he was on board. Then off again, as it looked as if his passion project El Diablo was going to be financed. It wasn't, and he returned. Carpenter did not want to take on writing duties for this film, but rejected the earlier drafts of the script Universal had already commissioned, and new scripts were delivered by sci-fi legends Richard Matheson and Nigel Neal, as well as Deer Hunter scribe Derek Washburn. But it eventually fell to Bill Lancaster, son of Hollywood legend Burt, to pen the final script, largely sticking to the original story but reducing the number of characters from 37 to 12, updating them and adding some iconic scenes, including the famous blood test scene. However, his ending had the 2 surviving characters both be the Thing, rescued at the end to terrorise another day. Carpenter didn't like this, so Lancaster rewrote it to include the ending we now see. With its all-male ensemble cast, many different actors were considered for every role. Carpenter was reluctant to work with Kurt Russell for a 3rd time by this point, but eventually decided that with the gruelling role carrying the movie, he wanted an actor he knew he could trust. And so Russell was cast as MacReady, the helicopter pilot. Keith David was not initially the frontrunner of Childs.
I'll take it. Like hell you will.
Until his audition, and coming from a theatre background, he had to learn film acting on the hop, with on-set help from Richard Masur.
Let's do what Max says.
And Donald Moffat.
And when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
Who played Clark and Station Commander Gary, respectively. The then unknown Wilford Brimley was cast as Blair, sans his now famous moustache, with T.K. Carter as Knowles.
Maybe we had war with Norway.
David Clennon as Palmer.
I'll give you the lift.
No problem.
Forget it, Palmer. Hey, thanks for thinking about it, though.
Charles Hallahan as Norris.
This is it, the place where they're spending most of their time.
Pretty nasty out, Mac.
Thomas G. Waits as Windows.
Let's go, Bennings. I gotta get some sleep.
John Pollis as Fuchs,
There's something wrong with Blair. He's locked himself in his room and he won't answer the door.
Peter Maloney as Bennings, and Richard Dysart as Dr. Copper.
Cabin fever, who knows?
The cast was complete. Dysart, Maloney and Moffat would all make appearances in different episodes of Columbo, a show I know a little something about. With soundstage filming not giving Carpenter the look he wanted, and frustrated with too many scenes of men standing around talking, he rewrote scenes to take place outside and film on location, which was far from perfect, with cameras freezing in the cold and production at the mercy of the weather. But, with the exception of Keith David damaging his hand the day before shooting, things went relatively smoothly. Carpenter reworked the script during shooting, sometimes for plot reasons, sometimes for budget reasons, which does create a few plot holes, with Knowles disappearing and Fuchs's death happening off-screen, and the now famous ending, which was reworked and reshot a few times, but with nothing matching the ending Carpenter had intended. The numerous special effects were mostly done in post-production, with creature effects legend Rob Bottin working on the complex animatronics of the Thing at various stages. His dedication to his work resulted in brief hospitalization due to exhaustion, so Stan Winston was recruited by Bottin to offer some help, which Winston refused to take credit for. The creature effects remain as astounding and horrific as they did on release. However, audiences in 1982 were apparently not ready for the film. It did manage to turn a small profit, but with negative critical and audience reaction, it was a long way from being considered a hit. It came out in the midst of a recession, up against the far more uplifting E.T., in a year filled with sci-fi and fantasy films, with less than stellar marketing. However, in the burgeoning home video market and television broadcasts, The Thing eventually found its audience, and is now considered a genre classic. The big question, though, is it any good? And the answer is yes. It's brilliant. A simple plot of an alien slowly taking over the appearance of members of this small science outpost as it kills them one by one, with no apparent motive other than to survive, is still fascinating and captivating. The practical effects look great. Using clever camera tricks and impressive models and animatronics, it feels real and gross. The performances from the cast of character actors are perfect. Tense, emotional, funny, and powerful throughout. What really gives this film its longevity, though, are the themes of paranoia and mistrust, with the film being made at one of the peaks of Cold War tension, with Reds Under the Bed still in the zeitgeist, a film where anyone could be the villain, with the potential world-ending alien creature replacing the threat of apocalypse from nuclear destruction. It's easy to see how it was reflective of its time.
I said watch Clark, and watch him close, do you hear me?
It's not just the fear of who to trust that the film plays on, though. It's also the fear of losing control of who you are, and being perfectly replaced by a monster.
It could have imitated 1 million life forms on 1 million planets, could change into any one of them at any time.
Its once heavily criticised, ambiguously nihilistic ending works brilliantly, allowing the audience to decide how they want the story to end. And while many have attempted to divine an answer from this ambiguity, I think those people are missing the point. It ends with two characters, in a desperate situation, not really knowing if they can trust each other, just waiting. Perhaps an ideal political metaphor for the age. Two sides, neither knowing whether the other plans to kill them, but rather than just act out of fear, they just wait.
Why don't we just wait here for a little while?
What's also interesting is the lack of women in the film, with the exception of a voice cameo by Adrienne Barbeau as the computer, as it means the male characters aren't trying to either impress or protect a helpless heroine, rather survive on their own terms, posturing only towards people they have been working with for months.
There should be somebody a little more even-tempered, Childs.
The film has rightly gone on to be reconsidered as a sci-fi horror classic, and inspired merchandise, comics, a game, and an admittedly lackluster sequel, which made the odd choice to use elaborate practical effects, as in the original, but then replace them with CGI in post-production. The cast would all go on to have varied careers of their own, and I guarantee that while you might not know all their names, you will have seen them in something. Unfortunately, Carpenter did lose work as a direct result of the failure of this film, but his career recovered, and he has delivered some of the best genre films of the 80s, but we'll get to some of those in the future. Thank you. Goodbye.